Hey everybody, how's everybody doing today? Welcome to Immediate Immersion Live. If you've ever thought, why am I the only one doing all the thinking in the classroom? You're absolutely not alone. Today we're talking about how to let your students' curiosity do the heavy lifting. Spoiler, it works way better than forcing them to care about subjunctive mood on a Tuesday. We've got wonder walls, what if chaos, and how to turn random student questions into legit CI units that don't make you want to scream into your whiteboard. Plus, don't forget, if your brain needs a little summer PD refresh, and whose doesn't, CI Summer Camp is now open. Check it out at mm.us/summercamp. We'll be right back after this short video. Don't go anywhere. And welcome back. So let's start with why student-driven CI units work best. Well, first of all, we use students when we personalize what we want to do because it allows engagement to happen much more. So if you're using a textbook-driven unit or one that you created that works best for you, that doesn't always incorporate your students. And when they're not central to what you're doing, then the engagement tends to fall away. So I've got 3 strategies that you can do to really create yourself student-driven units. So first is use a student wonder wall. So here you're going to have students write down interesting questions at the start of a unit, and then organize and guide the CI unit around the most relevant ones. So let's say, that first chapter of level 1 is always like getting to know the students. We'll have them write down 2 or 3 questions that they have about that. Like, maybe they have questions like, how do I say this? Or how do I do that? And you can then look at those questions, compile them. Using a Google form would be a great way to get that data in there, because then you can see related type questions, see any commonalities you have, group them together, because a lot of kids might be asking the same question in different ways. And then you can hone into, 3 to 5 of them that your whole student body is wondering about, and then you can create a unit around that. And because it's based off questions your students are wanting the answers to, the engagement is naturally built in. And that makes a really, really strong unit right there, because it's based around the student, using the stuff that you have to teach, but hyper focused on the students in your class that are in front of you. Another strategy is the what if expansion. So here you can ask students to take a basic topic and turn it into a deeper what if question. For example, what if we lived in a world without past tense? So then you can have the students work off of that. Take a basic topic and then turn it into something that's much more deeper focused. Sorry, my dogs are going a little bit crazy here. So you're taking whatever you're doing and ask kids to think about what if. So let's say you're doing a cultural unit. What if this particular cultural aspect didn't exist? Or what if that particular cultural aspect existed in your home culture? Or how would it look? What if that did? How would it look different from the original culture it came from? You see what I'm getting at here? You're asking kids to take something and expand it with a what if scenario so that you can dive more deep in it. And again, it makes it very student focused. And the third strategy would be curiosity driven input. So here, take your student questions and use them as the basis for all input. Stories, articles, interviews, and cultural comparisons. So maybe kids go, they want to know more about piñatas if you're teaching Spanish culture. So maybe they ask, what is the significance, or what is the piñata all about? So then you can go through and you can find some articles or some interviews or some maybe authentic short stories that involve piñatas. Because your students showed an interest in this topic, then it's naturally going to be highly engaging because it's all around what they are looking for, what they want. Another example might be student has questions about maybe the sports, how sports are done in a particular culture. Well, you can write your stories, you can find articles, you can find videos all about those kinds of topics to really engage your students. And when you take their interests, their questions, their thoughts into account when you're writing a unit about whatever you have to teach, because you can always adapt what you have to teach to your students, it makes for a much more engaging unit that your students want to participate in, not that they have to participate in. Does that make sense? Which of those are you more likely to try in your classroom? Which strategy? For me, one of my favorites is the student wonder wall. I really like that one, and it works really, really well for me. And then the curiosity driven input is the second one because I use a lot of those student interests to write my stories and delve deeper into the content. Next, let's talk to questions about the units. So take your questions that students have and you want to turn them in to a unit. So let's talk about that. How do we do that? How do we turn questions into a CI unit? Well, we need to break it down into themes. So if a student asks, why do people use different greetings in Spanish-speaking countries? This can turn into a unit on formality, culture, and pragmatics. Some Hispanic cultures are more formal than others. There's lots of different ways to say hi and goodbye. We can bring in the culture in because that's going to play a point into how people greet each other. It's common practice, for the kiss on the cheek in some countries where it's not um, customary in others. But you can see by when a student gives you this question how you can turn it into something bigger. Look at the different things that you can associate it with. Look at the language practices that you can do, the cultural practices that they can do. Look into all those aspects to make the question that a student has into a more well-rounded three-dimensional unit. You can also find authentic inputs. So take your student generated questions and now look for authentic videos, authentic articles, and stories that provide real world examples of the topic in context. Let's continue with our greetings and farewells. That's a common level 1 first chapter type of topic. So I can go through and I can find maybe couple different articles versus the formality of the language and how it might be changing to less formal. I know, let's talk about American culture that I'm very familiar with. When I was a kid, we would never address parents of our friends by their first names. It was always Mr. So and so or Mrs. So and so. Never would we address them by their first name. But it's very common for today's kids to address their friends' parents by their first name. We have become less formal over time. And a lot of countries are experiencing that movement. So you can use that. Find articles, maybe find a video about that. Or you can find a video of two people, maybe from two different countries in the same um, culture. So maybe Mexico versus Spain, or Guatemala versus Argentina, where they talk back and forth, and you can see and compare the greetings and the salutations that go on that way. Another thing that I've seen a few videos on, you can search in YouTube, and I'm sure they have it in multiple languages, but my language is Spanish, where they compare different words from different languages. So they might say the word for banana and how these people say it versus these people say it versus these people say it. So I might look for that for one on greetings and farewells, so that my students can get another aspect of that. Then I might also find stories, or at least excerpts from stories, that exemplify this formal and informal, this greeting and farewell, so that my students really get into the topic in context. I'm using those authentic input. What am I trying to say? I'm using authentic texts, whether they be oral texts or written texts, so that they can get that input in an authentic way in context to fully develop their questions into a well-rounded unit. And then the last one, strategy for questions, is storytelling with student interests. So I do this a lot in class. Every week, we are working on a new story and new written tests that work with my students' interests. So I'm going to craft mini stories, picture talks, or movie talks based on the questions students ask. So they're going to ask me questions, and it's going to spark a theme in my head, and then I'm either going to write that story, or I'm going to find a picture that could exemplify that we could develop into a story, or I'm going to search YouTube for a short video, and my favorites are animated shorts that may talk about that. So I can go through, and let me just do one really quick in the behind the scenes here. I'm going to do an animated short of two people greeting each other. And let's see what I come up with, if anything comes up right away. So the first thing that comes up off YouTube is an animated short that's 2.5 minutes long. First Comes Love. That could be a very fun one in there. Obviously, I'd have to preview it to make sure it's classroom appropriate, but you have something to start with, and that gives you somewhere to go. You might scroll down and find some other animated shorts that really work well. When I scroll down, I find another one here that's about 4.5 minutes long, and it's Handshake, a sticky love story. So that's another one that I might want to check into. Keep moving down and just seeing if I find anything else that right off the bat that stands out for me to talk about, that really hits the idea here. I'm trying to see if I could find any more. There's Modern Caveman greeting each other with 2 knocks. That's another one that shows up. So you can see what I'm doing. I'm just searching through, looking for what I can find, and seeing if I can find any that right off the topics. And that's just a cursory search to work on that and find what I can see that can help with my students. I can do the same thing with a picture talk, go through, look at Google Images, find in there. And what's even better nowadays with picture talks, you might never find exactly what you're looking for, but ChatGPT is so good now at coming up with images, either photorealistic ones or comic type images, cartoon type images, that I'll do with my student, that I'll ask ChatGPT to create one that's in my mind that will really work well on this. I might, let's say I'm doing in Asian, I teach an Asian language, and you know the bowing system that a lot of Asian countries have, and Americans don't understand that. So I might have them find, create a picture of an American bowing to an Asian, and then we can talk about that culture and how that works back and forth. So there's lots of different ideas that you can do there. But the point is that you're taking the questions that your students have, you're breaking them down, you're grouping them together and finding where they coalesce together. Then you're taking and you're finding authentic input sources that you can do, that you can add to them to fully dimensionalize what your unit's going to be. And then make some stories, whether they be written stories or oral stories or picture talks or movie talks, based around that. And that gives you a fully developed, really good way for creating a unit. Lastly, we want to keep it structured while staying flexible. We know we're teachers. Flexible is the name of the game. We have to be flexible because we might be a really an important lesson and the fire drill goes off. Or a kid says something that's really off the wall and it just derails the whole class. Or what I used to always hate was announcements that would come like 10 minutes before the bell, and try getting your kids back after they interrupt your class for that. So we have to be flexible. And so we want to do the same thing when we're coming up with our units. So my first strategy for this is the 3-question rule. Sorry, I'm checking what my dog is chewing on. Oh, you're playing with your hot dog. I didn't know if it was something good they're supposed to be chewing on or not. So the 3-question rule. So let students generate questions, but choose the top 3 that best align with proficiency targets. And again, I like to use something like Google Forms for this because I have a digital list, a that I can look at, and it will also, put them in a pie chart so I can see which ones are most common, etc. I get a lot of ideas from that way, and I have it there. I can sort it, and then I can choose the top 3 that would apply. Then you can also have a CI question board. So here you're going to create an interactive board where students vote on which questions get explored next. So you can take this, the questions from a form, a Google form that you've created, then you can group the questions together, rewrite them, come up with a list of maybe 7 to 10 of them, and then put them in a new Google form and have the kids vote on them that way. So then that way they're choosing from their choices. So they first came up with a list of questions that got together as a class, and you can do this on a Google form or as a group discussion and write it up on the whiteboard. And then you're going to turn that list to 7 to 10 questions and then have the students vote on them. You can do it by sorting, where they sort them, their top 3. Put them in order of their top 3, or put a 1, 2, 3 next to them. And then you can look them in the results of the Google form and find out what the top 3 are. And you can use that to create your unit from. And you can also use formative checkpoints. So here you'll use student-generated questions as built-in checkpoints for understanding through quick writing prompts, exit tickets, or class discussions. So if they have a question about, let me think of an example. Off the top of the head again, going back to our greetings, and they're asking their questions about the formal and informal greetings, I might have them write a quick writing prompt in English or whatever the home language is about what do they now know about the difference between formal and informal. Or I might ask them to write a quick little response about comparing the formality in one country compared to their home country and how that works. So I can get a checkpoint to see if their question that they asked and I built my unit around really has resonated and really has built some effect in there. So I can do things like that. Or we can have a class discussion based on it to kind of, so I can gauge where their comprehension and their proficiency is based on those questions that they're talking about. So there's lots of ideas. But when kids are inquisitive, that's telling you what you need to teach if you want to get them highly engaged. And there's always a way to take what they want to learn and match it up with what you have to teach, and then you come up with a highly effective lesson. So, it's a short one today. I hope you got some good ideas, but that's how you turn student questions into gold without losing your mind or your lesson plan. Now, if you're feeling inspired or just mildly less overwhelmed, go ahead and like and subscribe. It really does help us out. Maybe even send this to, oops, I put the wrong thing up on my screen. That's what I wanted here. To one teacher friend who always says, my kids never ask good questions. You know the one. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the chat or in the comments. I go back and I answer every single one. And don't forget, CI Summer Camp is calling your name like a free period on a Friday. Check it out at mm.us/summercamp. Catch you next time, Profe Squad. Marker drop. Have a good one, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.